Hey, Olive, Arlo, and Frank. Grandpa coming to you from the living room in Jacksonville Beach. Get buckled in. We're in Leviticus chapter 13. It's a long chapter. So let's dive right in. So first we're going to talk about skin infections. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron. When someone has a swelling or a scab, and a scab here, they're saying that the meaning is unclear. They don't know exactly what that word means. Scab or a bright spot on the skin of his body that may become a diseased infection. He must be brought to Aaron the priest or one of his sons, the priest. So if you recall, Aaron is the head priest, and his sons are just regular priests. The priest must then examine the infection on the skin of the body, and if the hair in the infection is turned white and the infection appears to be deeper than the skin of the body, then it is a diseased infection. So when the priest examines it, he must pronounce the person unclean. And we see in the New Testament, Jesus cleanses a leper. And he tells the guy, go show the priest. Do what you're supposed to do under the law. Show the priests and they'll declare you clean. But this is just in the very beginning. So we're declaring this person unclean because they have this. So next, let's look at a bright spot on the skin. If it is a white bright spot on the skin of his body, but it does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and the hair has not turned white, then the priest is to quarantine the person with the infection for 7 days. So you put him in a room by himself. The priest must then examine it on the 7th day. And if, as far as he can see, the infection has stayed the same and has not spread on the skin, then the priest is to quarantine the person for another 7 days. The priest must then examine it again on the 7th day. And if the infection has faded and has not spread on the skin, then the priest is to pronounce the person clean. It is a scab, so he must wash his clothes and be clean. If, however, the scab is spreading further on the skin after he has shown himself to the priest for his purification, then he must show himself to the priest a second time. The priest must then examine it, and if the skin has spread on the skin, then the priest is to pronounce the person unclean. It is a disease. This is very important for these people because they're out there, they're away from civilization, and so whatever kind of rudimentary healthcare system they had in Egypt, which I'm sure was very rudimentary, they don't have that. All they have is these priests. Next, we're going to look at a swelling on the skin. When someone has a diseased infection, he must be brought to the priest. The priest will then examine it, and if a white swelling is on the skin, it has turned the hair white, and there is raw flesh in the swelling. Raw flesh, rawness of living flesh is the exact translation. It is a chronic disease on the skin of his body, so the priest is to pronounce him unclean. The priest must not merely quarantine him, for he is unclean. If, however, the disease breaks out on the skin so that the disease covers all the skin of the person with the infection from his head to his feet, as far as the priest can see, The priest must then examine it, and if the disease covers his whole body, he is to pronounce the person with the infection clean. He has turned all white, so he is clean. Oh, I thought I was going a completely different way. But whenever raw flesh appears in it, he will be unclean. So the priest is to examine the raw flesh and pronounce him unclean. It is diseased. If, however, the raw flesh once again turns white, and white meaning that new white skin has grown over the old flesh. Oh, okay, so that's what they mean by white. So that's when the last one, when it was all turning white, I thought his body was becoming more infected, but it's healing. It's new skin growing over the old infected skin. He must come to the priest, and the priest will then examine it, and if the infection has turned white, the priest is to pronounce the person with the infection clean. He is clean. So next we're going to look at a boil on the skin. And a boil, is like a bump. When someone's body has a boil on its skin and it heals, and in the place of the boil there is a white swelling or a reddish white bright spot, he must show himself to the priest. The priest will then examine it, and if it appears to be deeper than the skin and its hair has turned white, then the priest is to pronounce the person unclean. It is a diseased infection that has broken out in the boil. If, however, the priest examines it and there is no white hair in it, it is not deeper than the skin, and it has faded, then the priest is to quarantine him for 7 days. If it is spreading further on the skin, then the priest is to pronounce him unclean. It is an infection. But if the bright spot stays in its place and has not spread, it is a scar of the boil. So the priest is to pronounce him clean. So next we're going to look at a burn. Their skin gets burnt. When a body has a burn on its skin and the raw area of the burn becomes a reddish white or white bright spot, the priest must examine it, and if the hair has turned white in the bright spot and it appears to be deeper than the skin, it is a disease that has broken out in the burn. So it started as a burn, but because that's open flesh, an infection has gotten into it. The priest is to pronounce the person unclean. It is a diseased infection. If, however, the priest examines it and there is no white hair in the bright spot, it is not deeper than the skin, and it has faded, then the priest is to quarantine him for 7 days. The priest must then examine it on the 7th day, and if it is spreading further on the skin, then the priest is to pronounce him unclean. It is a diseased infection, but if the bright spot stays in its place, has not spread on the skin, and it has faded, then it is the swelling of the burn, so the priest is to pronounce him clean, because it is a scar of the burn. So this says a skull, I don't know what it is, S-C-A-L-L, on the head or in the beard. When a man or a woman has an infection on the head or in the beard, the priest is to examine the infection, and if it appears to be deeper than the skin and the hair and the hair in it is reddish yellow and thin, then the priest is to pronounce the person unclean. It is scald, a disease of the head or the beard. But if the priest examines the scald, and it says the exact identification of the disease is unknown. Scald is a crusty, scabby disease of the skin under the hair that also affects the hair itself. But if the priest examines the scald infection and it does not appear to be deeper than the skin and there is no black hair in it, then the priest is to quarantine the person with the scald infection for 7 days. The priest must then examine the infection on the 7th day, and if the scald has not spread, there is no reddish yellow hair in it, and the scald does not appear to be deeper than the skin, then the individual is to shave himself, but he must not shave the area affected by the scald. And the priest is to quarantine the person with the scald for another 7 days. So you get to be quarantined and all itchy whenever you shave. Like if you're a man and you would shave your whole body, you would itch like crazy. The priest must then examine the scald on the 7th day, and if the scald has not spread on the skin, it does not appear to be deeper than the skin, then the priest is to pronounce him clean. So he is to wash his clothes and be clean. If, however, the scald spreads further on the skin after his purification, then the priest is to examine it. And if the scald has spread on the skin, the priest is not to search further for reddish yellow hair. The person is unclean. If, as far as the priest can see, the scald has stayed the same and black hair has sprouted in it, the scald has been healed. The person is clean. So the priest is to pronounce him clean. Oh, it goes on and on. We're up to verse 38, and it goes as far as verse 59. We're more than halfway through. Sorry. So here's bright white spots on the skin. When a man or a woman has bright spots, white bright spots on the skin of their body, the priest is to examine them, and if the bright spots are on the skin of their body are faded white, it is a harmless rash that has broken out on the skin. The person is clean. So now, we're going to talk about baldness. Baldness on the head. When a man's head is bare, so that he is balding in back, he is clean. If his head is bare on the forehead, so that he is balding in front, he is clean. But if there is a reddish white infection in the back or front bald area, it is a disease breaking out in his back or front bald area. The priest is to examine it, and if the swelling of the infection is reddish white in the back or front bald area, like the appearance of a disease on the skin of the body, he is a diseased man. He's a diseased man. He is unclean. The priest must surely pronounce him unclean because of the infection on his head. I had an uncle. It was a great uncle. His name was Wes, and he was my grandmother. Your great, Tom and Frank called her great-grandma. So it's your great-great-grandmother, Clark. He was very vain, and he wore a toupee, and the glue on the toupee created this horrible rash on his head. but he wouldn't take the toupee off because he was bald, and people would see that he was bald. And he wound up being really ill. I don't know if that's what eventually killed him, but the infection spread on the top of his head. It was just disgusting. It fits right into this chapter. The life of the person with a skin disease. So we're seeing here that they don't have a lot of medical care. So they're trying to figure out, is this person infectious or not? And if they're infectious, quarantine them for 7 days, or sometimes it's for 14 days. Quarantine them, check them later. But a lot of them are still going to be unclean. So they're not going to be healed. So let's look at the life of a person who has a skin disease. As for the diseased person who has the infection, his clothes must be torn. The hair of his head must be unbound. He must cover his mustache, and he must call out, unclean, unclean, unclean. So that's what they mean by covering your mustache. The whole time he has the infection, he will be continually unclean. He must live in isolation, and his place of residence must be outside the camp. And we're talking about like a couple million people. So it's the size of a city, and you have to be outside of it. And whenever anybody else comes out, because I think they would go out there to go to the bathroom and stuff, but when they come out, you gotta go like, unclean. So now let's talk about garments that have infectious fluids and stuff that get on them. Infections in garments, cloth, or leather. When a garment has a diseased infection in it, whether a wool or linen garment, or in the warp or woof of the linen or the wool, or in leather or anything made of leather, if the infection in the garment or leather or warp or woof, and they have to do with knitting, the warp and the woof. They're the two things that I think that go together and twist back and forth. If the infection is in the garment or leather or warp or woof or any article of leather is yellowish green or reddish, it is a diseased infection. Holy crap. Chapter 14 is going to be as long as this chapter. It's a diseased infection, and it must be shown to the priest. The priest is to examine and then quarantine the article with the infection for 7 days. He must then examine the infection on the 7th day. If the infection has spread in the garment, or in the warp, or in the woof, or in the leather, whether the article into which the leather was made, or whatever the article into which the leather was made, the infection is a malignant disease. It is unclean. He must burn the garment, or the warp, or the woof, whether wool or linen, or any article of leather which has the infection in it. Because it is a malignant disease, it must be burned up in the fire. But if the priest examines it, and the infection is not spread in the garment, or in the warp or the woof, or in any article of leather, the priest is to command that they wash whatever has the infection and quarantine it for another 7 days. I don't know why they don't wash it first off, but I'm not the one writing this book. The priest must then examine it after the infection has been washed out. And then if the infection has not changed its appearance, even though the infection has not spread, it is unclean. You must burn it up in the fire. It is a fungus, whether on the back side or front side of the article. But if the priest has examined it and the infection has faded after it has been washed, he is to tear it out of the garment or the leather or the warp or woof. Then, if it still appears again in the garment or the warp or the woof, or in any article of leather, it is an outbreak. Whatever has the infection in it, you must burn up in the fire. But the garment or the warp or the woof or any article of leather which you wash and infection disappears from it is to be washed a second time, and then it will be clean. So here's a summary. This is the law of diseased infection in the garment of wool or linen, or the warp or woof, or any article of leather for pronouncing it clean or unclean. Wow. That was uplifting. Peace out.